Hi guys, it's Kelly Latavola here and I'm back with another video for Neat and Tangled. Today we're going to be building a scene using some stencils. I'm using the Tree Duo Stencil, the Radiating Star Stencil, and then the stamp sets I'm using are the Lumberjack Love set, the Little Stinker with the little skunk, and then the brand new one which is Koalifications. So just super cute little scene here. This is, I kind of made it more for a friend, but they both have sentiments in their sets that could definitely make this a Valentine. And I am doing a one layer card. So I am going to stamp down my little skunk here. I want him or her, depending upon how you look at it, to be in the most forefront. So I'm stamping him first, and then I'm going to go ahead and mask him. I think today I'm using Eclipse masking paper. And then we're just starting the card and I'm about to make my first error. So I took the little tree stump from the Lumberjack Love set and stamped that down because I wanted to put my koala on top of it. So there would kind of be like two levels, except I didn't check to see where my koala would sit, and that the koala is supposed to be behind the skunk, but the banner is sitting in front of the skunk's face. That's a problem. So I stamped my koala higher up so that the banner would make sense, but now he's levitating off of my tree stump. I'm going to fix it later. It is what it is. I'm like, well, we're just going to roll with it. We should be able to fix it. So here I've got masks on all of my little images, and I showed you the vintage photo Distress Oxide, but I didn't end up using it. So I'm starting with the fossilized amber, and I'm going to put that about a quarter of the way down the card. I wanted to build the scene up, and I want whether it's a sunrise or a sunset, I wanted there to be that yellow in the background. And then I decided to bring in some picked raspberry from the top. I knew there was, well, at the time I thought it was going to be brown. I knew it was going to be really heavy with green and brown, so I wanted some brightness in there. And I thought that they'd just be really pretty blended together, the picked raspberry and the fossilized amber. So I'm going to put down the Radiating Star stencil, and then I'm going to go back in with the same colors. I'm a big fan of using stencils in a way where it's tone on tone. So once I have the pink down, I'm going to go in and use the fossilized amber. The reason I'm doing this one first is because I want the next layer of Distress Oxide to kind of blend this out so it's not as stark. Another thing I'm going to do to kind of blend it out is I'm going to go back in just along the bottom edge with the ink blender for the fossilized amber and just put down a little bit more color. Normally I don't show you cleaning off my craft desk, but I wanted to make sure to tell you I did have to clean off my Ranger craft mat because I wanted to make sure I didn't get any pink in my green, which would not be very pretty. So the next layer is going to start to be the beginning of my forest, and I wanted that to blend into the yellow. So I did the cracked pistachio first, and then I did the peacock feathers. And originally I was going to do the ground brown, and then I decided I didn't really want that brown. I'm just going to go straight peacock feathers, and we will see how it turns out. So I took that all the way down to the bottom. I'm going to go back in now with our next stencil. There are two stencils in this, the Tree Duo stencil. I only used one of them. I used the one that was kind of offset and a little bit smaller. That seemed to work better for my purposes. I am going to put down a piece of, I think it was just like 3M Post-it note tape on the bottom, just in case I get any of that distress ink over the edge of the stencil. I didn't want a hard line in the middle of my scene. So I'm filling that in with the cracked pistachio, and then I'm going to go back in with the peacock feathers and just add a little bit of shading from the bottom up so the trees blend into the grass line a little bit better. I'm going to remove that. You could totally leave it like that at this point, but I'm going to add another layer because I can't leave anything alone. So this time when I go in, because I'm missing that other color to break it up, I skipped out on the vintage photo. The combination of the fossilized amber and the cracked pistachio looked very yellowish green. So I thought, okay, well, I'll just play that up. I got out the Twisted Citra and Distress Oxide and used that. I did do the same shading kind of at the bottom with the peacock feathers just to help that blend a little bit better. And then we're going to remove no, I'm lying. I'm lying to you. I'm lying. We're not going to remove the mask yet. In order to bring kind of like that forest feel a little bit more forward, I'm going to use 2 of the trees from the Lumberjack Love set. And I didn't mask them because it doesn't matter. I want them to kind of blend into the background, even though I want them to be slightly more concrete than the trees we did the stencil with. I don't want them to be in the forefront of the card. I want these 2 little friends to kind of take center stage. So here I'm removing my masks, and I did have a little bit of a hard time for 2 reasons. One is there's a lot of moisture on this paper because I've gone over this with the Distress Oxides, and they don't dry down necessarily as quickly as Distress inks. The other reason I had a hard time is because I have on dark nail polish, and I cannot tell you how many cards I have just gotten like this bright red or burgundy streak across because I've tried to pick something up with my fingernail and I have drug it across my card. So I was trying to avoid doing that. We're going to move on to the Copic coloring. If you've seen me do grass scenes before, this will look very familiar to you. I am just doing flicks of color, starting with my lightest color all over, and I am trying to go all different directions, trying to go different lengths and widths because grass is not that uniform, especially if you were out in a forest. So I went with the lightest color all over everything, and then I'm going to take the mid-tone about halfway up, but definitely where my little characters are sitting. They would, it would be darker where it was kind of growing up around those areas, or where the little skunk is sitting on his booty. For the darkest color, again, I'm not going to bring it as far up, but I am going to put it around those objects. So around the trees, around my tree stump that my koala is currently levitating off of, which is never more profound to see than it right now with all of that green in between. He's floating in midair, folks. For the trees in the background, I'm going to use the same blue-greens to shade them, but in order just to make them a little bit more solid, I'm going to fill them in with a YG03. That matches that Twisted Citron pretty well, so it kind of sat nicely there. For the actual shading, like I said, I'm using the same blue-greens. For the first color, I'm just kind of adding shading just right down the middle. I'm leaving the lightest edge, or the lightest color on the edge, and just kind of doing that. For all the other colors, there's only 2. For the consecutive colors, I am adding shading from each kind of layer and just in a like a flicking motion so that they have a little bit of texture. I will tell you, coloring on top of Distress Oxides is a different animal because I'm not a scientist. I have no idea. This is from my experience, this is what I think. Because it's a pigment ink and it more or less sits on top of the paper and doesn't soak in like a dye does, it causes the Copics to also sit on top of the paper, and so they don't necessarily blend as well as they would if you were just coloring direct to paper or over a dye ink like Distress inks. I haven't ever had an issue coloring over those. It's only the oxides. So that's just something to know. I don't know how that's going to affect my Copics long term. I'm doing it anyway, as you can see, but that's something, you're kind of going to have to decide if that's going to be an issue for you or if that's something that you're worried about. I really like the look of it when I want something softer, which is definitely what I wanted for these trees. So I'm not sorry because I think it came out super cute, but just for your own investment. Picked out my favorite brown combination, and then we're going to go in with this tree stump. So I'm coloring in the other tree stumps with the darkest color. Should note that. So I just filled them in. I didn't even shade them because they're not my focal point. I'm not worried about it. So for this tree stump, I filled it in with the lightest color, which is an E53. And then I'm going to go and fix my levitating koala. So basically all I did was take the darkest color and just kind of emulate that shape in the back so that it would be taller, and that section is darker anyway because it would be further away. So it's not even really something that's going to be a big deal. I will bring the whole thing together when I outline it to make it look like it's just part of that stamp, and it'll be fine. At least now he's got something to stand on, right? For the actual shading of the stump on the bottom, the way it's drawn is there's a section that kind of comes out forward. So I'm adding shading behind that. I'm also adding a little bit of shading in the center of it to kind of make it look a little bit concave. I'm only adding very minimal of the darkest color. And then to get some texture, I'm going to go in and do just kind of some squiggly lines, some whirls here and there. You don't really need a lot because it's not a large area, but it's going to give us that wood grain texture, like that bark texture that you would see out in the woods. And I really, I think it adds a lot to the card, especially when, as of right now, nothing has a lot of detail and it's all just kind of pushed into the background. So I always work from my darkest color to my lightest back out to my darkest. I'm not going to completely saturate the area where I've drawn in the texture with the lightest color. I'm more or less just going to sweep it over it with just the tip of the marker. So some areas are more blended than others. For my koala, I opted to do some warm grays. Like I said, I knew I was going to have to put basically all of my color in the background because my little animals are going to be pretty neutral. So I just went with a 1, a 3, and a 5 in the warm grays. And I'm really just adding shading where on the outside of his little ears, on either side of his face to give it some roundness, where he's holding that banner, there would be a shadow cast behind him. And then kind of like in the middle of his legs, like where his little koala thighs are, there would be some shading. So, I have recently started, well, I've done it once and it almost killed me. I started doing Beachbody's Hip Hop Abs. I don't know if you're familiar with any of the Beachbody's programs, but they're rough. But I have kind of been out of the workout game for a while. After I had my son, I was going to the gym consistently trying to lose that extra weight that we all get from, lovingly carrying our child. And so I had lost the weight, but I periodically put on that extra 10 pounds. And especially now that I'm a little bit older. But so I was like, okay, well, I like to dance. And when I was younger, high school and college, I danced all night long. You take me to a wedding, I do some cha-cha slide, I'll do some electric slide. I'm fine. It's good fun. So I was like, yeah, I could do that workout. It's like, a 25, 30 minutes of good solid cardio. Doesn't sound like a terrible time. I've done the Zumba classes. I've done it on my Wii, the Zumba classes. I'm pretty sure Shaun T was actually trying to kill me. Like, I think I should call my local police department and report an attempted murder because that 25 minutes, I was dying. I was absolutely dying. And like all the little girls in the video, they're so cute and they're super fit and God love them, in their cute little outfits. I was not cute by the time that video was over. I was sweaty. I was gross. I did it. I made it through, and that's really all that counts. But yeah, that was rough. And then they have like this diet that comes with it that if you want to follow that, and it's hardcore. Like, I know they're trying to get people the most extreme results that they can, but I'm like, you gotta live. Like, I gotta live. I need pizza. I need chocolate. Like, there are things I need in my... Last night when I shot this video, at 2:00 in the morning, do you know what I snacked on? Cold bacon. Cold bacon right out of my fridge. And the best part about that bacon was I didn't make it. My mama did. Thanks, Mom. I love the bacon. I'm not giving up bacon. So I realize that there is going to be a limit to what I personally can achieve. But I'll try it again. I'll try to do the videos again. It's rough. Exercise is hard. I mean, obviously that doesn't mean you shouldn't do it. You should be healthy and all of those things, but I am lazy also. So I thought dancing would be the way to go. I don't know that it is. We're going to have to keep, I don't know, investigating that. So coloring my skunk, I opted for the cool grays because I wanted him to be black. And I know you're probably looking at this right now, coloring it and being like, Kelly, I think you forgot how to color a skunk because that area is supposed to be white. I didn't forget how to color a skunk. Hang with me. I know we added a lot of shading to that white area, but it's kind of because he's got the sign in front of him. He's got this swirly tail. It's going to look white by the time we're done with it. Just hang tight. So I filled in all of the black areas with a C5. That's going to be my lightest color. And it just went once over with everything. And then I'm going to start adding my shading out from there. That's why we had all of the C markers, because we have a white area and a black area. His face is right in front of his tail. This can get a little bit tricky because you don't want his face to blend into his tail. You want to be able to see his cute little face. So I am adding the shading just, like I normally would, kind of like underneath his like little flap of Elvis hair he's got going on there, on either side of his hands where it's wrapping around the sign. I'm going to add shading to the base of his tail as well as to the tip of the tail. And then I am going to add shading behind his head. This is going to start to get a little bit tricky, especially since I stamped in black to see those lines. But in order to segregate the two, you'll see here when I put down the line for the C9, I did not go all the way over to the side of his head. I did not go all the way over to the side of his head because I want that C7 on the edge. This is going to help differentiate between his head and his tail. So when you're coloring a tail like this or anything like this where it's this shape, you want to make sure that you are putting your flicks of color down in the same shape that the object is drawn in. So make sure you're curving your lines when that tail curves or it's going to look strange. The other thing that I'm going to do to differentiate the tail from the head is I'm not going to add the black, the 100 marker, to his face. I'm only going to add it to the tail and the hands. This is going to create a darker tail behind his head, and we already have that lighter edge on the side of his face, so it's going to help him kind of pop forward. And I know you might think, well, that's going to look weird, like the side of his head isn't going to be shaded. It's not so, the shading isn't so far off that it looks comical. It will still make sense, but you'll still be able to tell that there is a separation between the two. So again, from my lightest color out to my darkest back into my lightest. And the C5, because it is the lightest color, it really does a lot to kind of pick up color. So if you're very nervous about my little skunk's face and that he's not going to have any eyeballs, don't worry. As we put the C5 over, it will pick up some of that color. And then because I like to outline my images, once I do that, his eyeballs, you'll be able to see them. Since I had these markers out and this koala nose is so big and cute, I decided I was going to add just a little bit of shading to that as well, so it kind of fit the rest of the coloring that we did on the koala. I did add pink to my little skunk's ears, just like I did the koala's ears. I just somehow missed taping it, I guess. I thought that it would be like, so normally when I do banners and stuff, my go-to is the neutral colors. I do typically the cool grays, but I could do warm. I don't really venture too far away from that because usually paper is white. But because I have a warm gray koala and a cool gray skunk, I thought it would be kind of fun to bring in another color for the little signs. So I picked some pinks because I already have that going on in the sky. And I thought it would be, usually you work in like elements of 3 or odd numbers. So this kind of gives me that element of 3 with the pink, ties everything in together. So I'm adding shading to both the left or right hand sides for both of their, the banner and the sign. And then I'm also adding just a little bit of shading where their hands are holding it, or in the skunk's case, also his feet. The RB04 is a little bit aggressive, I'm not going to lie. Typically it blends out a little bit more. The RVO2 lifts it quite a bit, but my marker was pretty dry, and I'm not going to lie to you, I was lazy and I didn't refill it. The results probably would have been better, but even as is, it's not terrible. It doesn't look like, oh my gosh, she didn't even try to blend it. I added just a couple of little white dots to either side of the banner to kind of break up that blending a little bit, since I wasn't exactly thrilled with it, but also too lazy to refill the marker. So just did a couple of white dots there, and then I am going to outline all of my forefront images. So my koala, the tree stump, and the skunk, both of their signs. I did not re-outline the trees because I do want them to be more structured than the ones we stenciled, but I don't want them to kind of come forward and take any of the focal point away from my cute little characters, who would not even live in the same forest, by the way. Skunks are typically native to North and South America, where koalas are typically native to like Australia, but this is my fantasy forest and I can make them friends if I want to. So basically I stamped the little sentiments, which I think are super cute, and then I went in with Clear with Castella, and then I was like, am I done? I'm not done. The reason I'm not done is because I wanted this kind of fun sunrise, sunset in the forest. And a lot of times when you have light filtering through, you get like those little sunspots where there's moisture in the air. And so I thought that I could mimic this with perfect pearls and also add some shine, because I love me some shine. So basically what I'm doing is I'm just holding a kind of a scrap piece of paper up over their faces. Like I didn't want that on their faces. Anywhere that I couldn't get close enough because of that paper, I just kind of dropped it in myself. And I was really happy with the way that it turned out. I feel like it's a cute, you know, happy little forest. So that is the entire card. Thank you guys so much for joining me, and I will catch you on the next video. Bye.